Okay, colleagues, greetings and welcome back. So, today I want to talk about the theory and, more importantly, the practice of meditation. Now, before we begin, just a small housekeeping note. Thank you so much for everybody who has been keeping in touch. Thank you for your comments and thank you for your questions. In case you want to talk to me, I guess the best ways to do this these days is YouTube or Telegram. Hopefully the links should be in the description somewhere. So, yes. And if you want to learn more about my general philosophical approach, my main course that I have taught throughout the years, throughout the 10 plus years of teaching philosophy, is the Introduction to Social and Political Philosophy, which was recorded for Coursera, but all the lectures are available here on the YouTube channel. So in an important sense, I would imagine that's kind of the core of what I'm trying to do philosophically. So kind of specializing in political philosophy. And I'm going to try to bring to bear my insights from political philosophy in talking about meditation. I do feel that these two topics are related. If you want to do good political philosophy, you need to meditate, to calm yourself down, and to think clearly. And likewise, if you start doing political philosophy, you realize all sorts of ways in which, society or outside forces try to get under our skin. And so you need to deploy meditation as self-defense. So there's this kind of mutually reassuring, positive feedback loop between the two disciplines. Philosophy of meditation and political philosophy, if you want. I also like to talk about philosophy of science, and maybe we'll have a chance to discuss that a little bit. Today, I do have a bunch of videos on philosophy of science on the course, on the channel. I'm planning to do more, and there's a bunch of smaller videos, so feel free to look around. Anyway, so meditation is one of those things which is simple and yet complex. It's one of the joys of life, I would say, one of the things that keeps me going over these, 10 plus years of working as a professional philosopher. And it's one of those things which is difficult to do in a classroom. And this is one of the reasons I am not necessarily very upset that I'm not back in classrooms this September, right? So this gives me an opportunity to engage in some of the things I could never quite get to because the format of the university is not necessarily very conducive to these kinds of enterprises. And I want to talk more about this. I already mentioned this in my video yesterday, Philosophy as Practice. And for me, philosophy is very much a daily practice, and there's this, in my head, there's this deep relationship between, philosophy as a daily practice and meditation as a daily practice, and I feel that these two go together. I should probably mention something about cognitive behavioral therapy at some point. Now, it's a therapy, so it can be done well or it can be done badly, but I do feel that cognitive behavioral therapy has actually quite a lot of insights. And very often when people talk about mindfulness and meditation, especially in terms of mental health, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, comes up a lot. And over the years I have been having this impression that part of what I'm doing in classroom excuse me, part of what I'm doing in classroom is actually being something like a psychotherapist for first year, second year, and third year students who, among other things, are many people are struggling. I don't want to make any special claims for myself, but adolescent years I don't think are easy for many people. Let's put it that way, in terms of mental health and in terms of feeling at home in the world, I think the way I see the philosophical enterprise is that philosophy, I like this phrase, philosophy should be to the soul what medicine is to the body. And meditation is a very important part of that. There's a million things I want to say. Let me jump right into meditation, and then as we go along, hopefully I'll be able to bring out some of the other related topics. So a good question to start is to ask in general, what is meditation? And, potentially this could be a very complex discussion. Could just have a whole separate course on the history of meditation, or psychology of meditation, or psychoanalysis of meditation, or neuroscience, evolutionary psychology of meditation. There's all sorts of angles that one could take. And, in an important respect, I want to keep all of those in mind, and kind of, I'm not just saying this just to give a list, but because I do want to, probably not in today's video, but at some point, to get to all of those different aspects. But more specifically for the purposes like right now, let's start very simply. So I used to give lectures on Buddhism. I haven't done this in several years now, and I kind of want to get back on track, and I want to kind of redo them in a more proper fashion, because my understanding of Buddhism has evolved. And again, when I talk about meditation, I don't think it's like, I'm not necessarily talking just about Buddhist meditation. I think that there's a particular kind of universal, that sounds too strong and too ambitious. But, when you talk about Stoic meditation, Buddhist meditation, or Epicurean meditation, something that maybe Socrates used to do, right? There's a certain sense in which there's a common kernel of what they're talking about. And I mentioned a second ago, when I was doing lectures on Buddhism, I try to start with this kernel, because again, Buddhist meditations, various forms of Buddhist meditation, and there are various traditions. But let's start with something very simple, something very basic. So just being able to sit down and be calm and be composed, be together with yourself for a period of time. And in an important sense, I don't necessarily want to bring too much Buddhism from the start, but that's an immediate way. That was an immediate way for me to describe what the Buddha means, and what it means to attain enlightenment or attain nirvana. That's a very superficial definition, and that's a very kind of preliminary definition. So it's not kind of the full-fledged everything we need to know about that. But as a first pass, the Buddha is somebody who is able to be just calm, present with themselves. And this word, serenity or tranquility, calmness, right? These are the words that come to mind. And whenever I talk to students about this, and again, first year, second year, third year students, it's amazing how difficult it is, how challenging it is for many people to engage in some form of meditative practice. So again, because I promise that this is not just going to be theory, but also practice, let's do a bit of practice. So let's start with something very simple. 30 seconds. Let's start with 30 seconds of mindfulness. So let's just try to sit comfortably, if we can, with a spine upright. This is incidentally why I feel that kind of, philosophy feeds into meditation, because if you want to do philosophy, you need to clear your mind. And then meditation almost immediately, automatically, for me, leads into yoga, because in order to meditate comfortably, you need to be sure that your mind and your body are attuned to each other. But let's try just for, feel free, if you want to do more than 30 seconds, feel free to pause the video. But let's try to do this for 30 seconds. Let's try to be calm and be present and be composed. Again, people are different, and people's psychological makeup is different. But whenever I talk to students, I have the impression, and this was very true in my own experience, is that whenever in our, again, neoliberal, late capitalist, post-industrial societies, whenever people try to meditate, their mind gets flooded with regrets about the past or anxieties about the future. Kind of our mind is constantly racing. We're in this, ADHD, always looking to concentrate on something, always looking for a new distraction, right? And the point of meditation is also very importantly not to fall asleep, which again for students sometimes is extremely difficult. This is one of the challenges of doing meditation in a classroom. You talk to people, you propose we meditate for a minute or maybe for 5 minutes, and half the room is, restless and have this desire to check their phones or to play or to talk to their friends, and half the room falls asleep because they haven't had any sleep at all the previous night or something close to that. But meditation, again, is not sleep. It's calmness, composure. It's also very importantly attention to what goes on, because thoughts will pop up. It's like when people do this often and do this, I don't want to say full time, but when people start to meditate seriously, of course, you start getting into these states of mind where little is going on, where there's this calmness and serenity and pretty much nothing comes to mind. And that's nice, that's very pleasurable. But in an important respect, I feel that this is a really important point. Like, thoughts will come, especially at early stages. That's the point. Our mind is restless, and it's difficult to meditate for some people. I would imagine for most people I talk to, it's difficult to meditate in the beginning, and not necessarily immediately very pleasant. Although some people do find it, calming and nice, productive in some sense from the very beginning, from the first meditation. Again, this was my experience, something that you do and it helps you from the very beginning, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that meditating might be difficult, and it's okay. It's good in some sense. Like when you do a workout, your muscles, they ache or they become stressed, right? You stress the muscles, and this is how the muscles grow, right? In a similar fashion, when you try to meditate, it's as if you have this muscle in your head. Hegel very famously has this misquoted remark. He talks about how the spirit is the bone, or the spirit is a bone, right? But kind of not necessarily going into what Hegel specifically meant there. I really like this phrase, this idea that, you talk about muscles, but inside of your head, there's also something like a muscle. There's a cascade of neuronal activation, and you can retrain it. But when you try to retrain it, there's a certain, force of habit, so it resists, and so it takes a certain amount of effort, right? And so meditation is supposed to be effortful. And a very important thing I also want to mention, again, this was very true in my experience. Some days meditation is easy and pleasant, and that's nice, that's wonderful, this is what keeps the practice going. But other days you find yourself restless, stressed, anxious, maybe, we hope that these days don't happen very often, but they do. This is part of human condition. And it's very important to meditate in those days. The meditative practice in bad days, emotionally bad days, is in some sense much more important than meditative practice in calm and serene days. In serene days, you're already serene, so, it's like meditation is not all that necessary. But in being able to, first of all, notice, and this is, again, something that comes up a lot, being able to notice that something goes wrong with your body, even in a very pedestrian fashion, being able to notice that you have an ache in your body, that you have a discomfort in your body. I mean, it actually took me maybe more than a year of doing regular yoga and mindfulness to realize that I have this problem. When I'm stressed, this shoulder tenses up like a lot. And I've had this tension for many years, but again, it took me something like, close to 12 months of yoga and meditation to realize that I've even had this. Because like when you live with this feeling all the time of the muscle being tense and stressed, and in our culture, which distracts us constantly, it's difficult to keep track of those things, right? But meditation among other things, so it's about control, self-control. It's about composure, it's about calmness, it's about, reducing the level of stress. It's about, learning to be more in control of your life and making less impulsive decisions that you are then led to regret later down the line. But it's also about noticing kind of this basic empirical or phenomenological feedback, understanding what goes on with your body. And we often discuss this with students, like what is happiness, what is well-being. And again, in the way in which I engage with ancient philosophical traditions like Buddhism or ancient Greek tradition, but also with contemporary traditions like Freud or Heidegger or Marx or Foucault, I feel that kind of in the ancient times and in the modern times, the right way to do philosophy is to have this immanent, not transcendent, but immanent criterion of right and wrong. Immanent in the sense of, like, immanere in Latin means like present at hand, present, like in hand, something that you have in your experience, something with you, right? So when you do something right, it feels right? When you meditate, you experience this calmness and serenity, and it feels good, right? And kind of the point is that if you pay close attention to your experience, you will learn to distinguish between various pleasures and, other things which appear pleasurable or which are cultural values might not be, as good in an immanent fashion, right? So it's like all this competition about expensive clothing or all sorts of, different kinds of food, which are not supposed to make you feel good, but which are supposed to kind of trigger your emotions. And when you learn to meditate and to calm yourself, you start feeling like an element of pain and discomfort, even in those pleasures. And that's why, again, somebody like Epicurus has this wonderful distinction between static and dynamic pleasures, right? Dynamic pleasures being, pleasures of sex, wine, intoxication, or, expensive, luxurious food. And he talks about them as dynamic pleasures, meaning that, yes, they give you a rush of some kind of neurotransmitter, maybe dopamine, but then you crash, or there's this certain element of addiction, there's a certain element of passion. Buddhists would say dukkha, an element of suffering embedded in those pleasures. An element of craving, right? You crave luxurious food, and then if you can't get that, you get upset. But if you, again, meditation or yoga, or even going for a walk, or playing the piano, for example, these are the calm, serene, static pleasures which personally I never crave. And I don't think that other people, like the human mind doesn't exactly work that way. You don't crave meditation, right? But it's pleasurable. And in fact, again, I enjoy meditation or yoga much more than I enjoy all sorts of other things which I do crave, right? But learning to notice this is a very important part. Okay, so I promised we're going to do a bit of practice, but then I got distracted. But it's okay. Because before we start meditating, it's important to know what to be on the lookout for. And maybe one last remark, like, again, learning to be with your mind, learning to be calm, but also learning to observe, is kind of the part of the nuance is that when you first close your eyes, you don't need to. You can meditate with your eyes open, but sometimes it's helpful to have your eyes closed. Sometimes it's helpful to have your eyes open, right? But when you do this, when you're only starting, it's as if you end up in something like a jungle or in a foreign land. There's all sorts of things going on in your mind that you've never really noticed before, never really paid attention to. So at first it might be overwhelming. So it's important, again, before, again, our first meditative session, I feel it's important for me to have laid out at least some of the things to be on the lookout for. And if you find yourself, again, if you find intrusive thoughts, and that's a very interesting thing. That's a very kind of, talk about philosophy, people like Descartes, or these ideas of immortal soul, that the human being is this one singular thing called the soul. I think kind of the meditative experience proves that wrong. Again, you find yourself in the situation, again, I'm using sort of Heideggerian jargon, and thoughts, they come, they pop up, they bubble to the surface, and sometimes they intrude, and sometimes thoughts are unpleasant and violent and intrusive very often, and this is part of the reason to do meditation. So if thoughts come, which it's hard to let go, one technique that I find useful is, again, try to, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, and this is one of the topics I like to talk about in general, this meditative stance, this, being an observer. The Greek word is theoria, observation, contemplation. Theoria originally, I think, meant something like an ecstatic unity with the divinity, with the divine, right? But for Pythagoreans, again, they talk about how there are different kinds of people who come to Olympic Games, or if you want, there are different kinds of people who are incarnated, because the Pythagoreans believed in reincarnation, who are incarnated into these bodies. Some people pursue pleasure, and the merchants, the dealers, the traders. Some people pursue honor and glory. They come to compete, the athletes, the politicians, the warriors. But the best kind, according to the Pythagoreans, are the ones who are observers, detached observers. Again, Jesus, in the Gospel of Thomas, this is saying number 42, says, become passerby. This detached observational attitude, as if you're writing a book, or as if you're a scientific observer and you're writing down what you see, or as if you're a writer and you are collecting material for a story and you're trying to observe. So if thoughts come, if intrusive thoughts come, just try to label them, note them down. It's like, try to be curious about it. That's interesting. That's a thought that came to mind. Label it and then kind of let it go. Just let it go. And more often than not, I think that's a helpful advice. Anyway, let's do this for at least 30 seconds, and then again, feel free to pause the video if you want to do this for more, and then we'll continue with the debriefing. You don't need the sound, but sometimes it helps. I have to say, I immediately find this, very, very pleasurable in an Epicurean sense. It's like this wave of happiness and serenity. I got this little thing in Japan, in the Enryakuji temple, which is, well, I'm not sure if it's my favorite temple in Japan, but I do have emotional attachment to it. In Sakamoto, Hieizan mountain. And the Japanese call this Oto no Suichi. Oto no Suichi. Suichi, which is an English loan word which means switch. Oto no Suichi is sound switch. I'm sure there's a more Buddhist, native Japanese way of calling this. Maybe orin or furin, rin, the bell. But oto no Suichi is actually what was written on the package to this thing. So it's a sound that helps you, switch from this mode of being constantly in a rush, this ADHD mode of our society, switch to a calmer, more serene state. Also, one other thing that I did is I took a deep breath, and this is also very helpful in meditation. Like in general, it helps calm down. It's a psychosomatic thing. And again, it's like when we do philosophy, there are all sorts of these things. Always these discussions about human nature. But human beings do have a nature. And our nature is biological. It's entwined with biology. Human beings are wired in a certain way. For most anatomically normal human beings, you take a deep breath, and there are certain physiological processes in the body, somatic processes, which lead to you becoming just more quiet, calm. You take one deep breath, or maybe 7 or 8, and this has an effect on your body. It's best, again, in my experience, it's best to breathe through the nose and take a deep, slow breath, and especially try to have a slower kind of exhale. Exhale very slowly, as slowly as you find it comfortable. And also one other thing that, again, meditation, yoga, this kind of important point of contact, is that I found it, again, necessary, and many people I have spoken to feel the same, found it necessary to learn how to breathe using your stomach, using your diaphragm. Because again, and this is one of the hallmarks of capitalist society. You see, I'm talking about capitalism all the time, because for me, kind of, the Marxist practice, the Marxist understanding of how capitalism tries to hijack our brain, Marx, this classical social theorists like Marx or Weber or Durkheim would talk about this efficiency for the sake of efficiency, this disenchantment, this rationalization, this constant drive for instrumental rationality. Again, Heidegger might talk about this technological understanding of being, right? Our society tries to, force us to be as efficient, as productive as possible. Again, not necessarily efficient for our own goals, because you can be efficient at meditation, you can be efficient at studying philosophy. But, society is driven by profit for the sake of profit, capitalist accumulation for the sake of capitalist accumulation. Or at least that's my belief, and this is why I, for better or for worse, even though many people don't like the name of Marx, I feel it's important to come back to Marx because he has this very valuable, very important insight. In many ways, I feel the most important insight in trying to understand the society in which we live, right? But I was talking about, it's like this digression is for a reason, because I think in our capitalist society we're stressed all the time, and we wake up in the morning, we drink coffee in order to get ourselves pumped, and then in the evening, unfortunately, so many people are forced to take sedatives or maybe even drink wine because it's hard for them to calm down. So you have this jolt of energy, chemical energy in the morning. You stimulate yourself with cocaine, with caffeine or nicotine, or maybe with other substances. Unfortunately, you can see my train of thought was a slip of tongue, but I don't necessarily want to bring up these tragic topics, but it's true. Again, Marx talks about the opium of the people, and Rick Roderick has this phrase: sometimes the opium is the opium of the people. Right? This I don't want to oversimplify this discussion, but there's something to that, right? And meditation is a way to, to some extent, to take a critical distance, to get out, to try to rearrange your brain in a different fashion and not rely on this external stimulation, which, at least in my experience, again, also, I think there's research to back this up. This stimulation, you get desensitized. So when you drink coffee, at some point you lose these short-term benefits, although who knows exactly what are the benefits and the harms of caffeine. There are some studies, but these studies, I think, are mostly subsidized by caffeine companies. Can we really trust them? Actually, it's like when I've been recording my Coursera, I've used a bit too much caffeine. I try to actually never drink coffee. When I was teaching, I would have maybe a cup or 2 cups before important lectures, which I did like once or twice a week. But then, as I've been recording my Coursera, I was thinking, and this might not have been the best idea, but you can see this efficiency for the sake of efficiency. Kind of, I talk about this kind of right livelihood in the Buddhist sense, and how the university is not exactly the most conducive environment, right? And all sorts of things I could talk about there, right? So people come to the classroom with all sorts of emotions, sometimes not necessarily very wholesome emotions. And the job of a teacher, the profession of a teacher, exposes one to all sorts of, let's say, less than wholesome interactions. Don't necessarily want to get into to all of this, but, especially because there's this kind of competition and differentiation, and students fight for grades, especially if grading is on a curve, and some students want to cheat. Unfortunately, some of these aspects of learning can become very emotionally charged. Also, another problem is that, again, this external motivation, again, that people are kind of forced into this mold. There's a lot of fear in students, fear of losing their discount, or fear of failing the grade. And this introduces all sorts of these subterranean, subconscious emotions, which make a classroom sometimes an environment which is less than ideal for learning, right? And again, if the teacher is high on caffeine, and if the students are high on caffeine, this is I feel, not a very kind of productive arrangement. But again, and it's like, this is to some extent a confession. I'm not a perfect person by any standard. I'm very happy to admit this. Kind of admitting your problems is the first step to solving them. I feel I've started abusing caffeine when I've been doing my Coursera, drinking daily. And then once Coursera was over and I tried to get off of caffeine, I've actually experienced very severe side effects, I have to tell you. For about a week, my energy levels were completely out of whack, and for the first several days, like my head was spinning, my ears were ringing, and I had this very kind of strange, uncharacteristic headache. And this is one of the reasons I thought I shouldn't go back on caffeine. I haven't had, well, I mean, it's like, obviously you do ingest some caffeine from time to time, just by way of foods. I mean, chocolate, among cocoa powder, among other things, has a measure of caffeine. Tea actually has quite a bit of caffeine, so I'm sure I intake some caffeine from time to time. But I think I haven't had like a purposeful cup of coffee for months now, and I'm very happy about this. Although again, one has to remember, and again, I like this phrase from Hegel: "Spirit is a bone. Spirit is a bone." You know, the psyche is a system. It's a hydraulic system. Whenever you try to change something about your life, like start meditating or quitting caffeine or doing something about your diet or, you know, getting into yoga, you know, we have to remember that change is always stressful, and kind of you need it is best to approach it, you know, with a bit of caution, with a bit of nuance, and with a bit of self-reflection. And meditation actually helps with all this. It helps you kind of monitor, get a feedback on how the system is functioning. And no, I think it's a very important precaution that, you know, some people try to quit caffeine and they fail, and this actually makes it worse. Or some people try to go on a diet and end up, you know, actually harming themselves. So, like, this is not professional medical advice, okay? I'm not a doctor. So if you're trying to do some drastic changes to your life, it's best to approach them carefully, cautiously, do your own research, and ideally, if you can, consult with professionals. Although meditation, kind of in all of those aspects, I feel is kind of the simplest thing to do. There are pitfalls of meditation, and in principle, you know, I don't necessarily want to talk about this right now, and maybe I'm not the best qualified person to talk about this. I don't have a degree in psychotherapy, but especially, you know, some people, if they have certain dysfunctional thoughts or dysfunctional patterns of thinking, dysfunctional cognitive patterns, sometimes those can be exacerbated by meditation. I think this happens very rarely, but this is kind of an important kind of safety warning I think I should, you know, I feel I should include. Right? Talking about all sorts of things. So I you know, let me sort of talking about caffeine and kind of this learning to breathe with the stomach. Let me try to go back a little bit to meditation, and let me maybe even I'm trying to wrap this up. Let me maybe sort of finish by talking about this kind of emergency meditation. So what do I mean by emergency meditation? So sometimes, unfortunately, in our society, you know, many people find themselves in situation of great distress. Again, I feel meditation can be very helpful in those sorts of situations. So what I personally would do when I'm thinking of the most stressful experiences in the past years, grading papers, and, you know, then giving grades, kind of assembling the grades, tends to be very stressful for me. So what I would do, especially like if I find myself in great distress and kind of tired and stressed after long days of work, what I would do is I would try to sit comfortably. There are all sorts of meditative poses that one can assume, but maybe just sitting comfortably in a chair is one. If you can do something like Padmasana or Vajrasana, you know, I find those poses to be kind of most conducive. You know, Buddha sits here in a meditative pose. Yeah, so the mudra, putting your hands in some form of a stable position, like this, for example. It's difficult to show on this camera, but you can guess. So putting your hands, or maybe putting your hands on your knees, then trying to breathe deeply and calmly, inhaling and exhaling slowly. Closing your eyes is one thing you can do. Sometimes keeping your eyes closed is difficult, and it actually makes it harder to meditate. So one thing that you could do is you could turn off the lights, if you can find a dark room, and then have some candles. Maybe one candle, look at it. Another thing that you could do is have two candles, maybe 1 meter apart. And then you try to look between the candles and keep the candles, look at them, but not with your focused frontal vision, but with your side vision, right? And keep the two candles in the side vision. Maybe, or maybe if you want, have 3 candles. Focus on the one in the middle, but try to keep the side candles also in focus. Look between them. And this is mantra, mudra, and mandala, right? The Sanskrit words. I talk about Buddhism, but of course, meditation is part of the Hindu tradition. It's part of the Sikh tradition. It's part of Daoist tradition. So there's all sorts of insights to be gained in meditation. And like especially this way, I'm explaining this emergency meditation. It has this yogic quality. Again, in yoga, you strike a pose, and the pose is stable, and you have this tension and contraction of the muscles. Some of the muscles are stretched, some of the muscles are tense, but the pose is stable and calm. And this is what we want to do in meditation, and we want to, especially in this emergency meditation, early stages, like early level, the easiest meditation to get into. Again, your mind, you focus on the candles. Maybe you also focus on the sound. Find some maybe calming music online. Singing bowls. I really like singing bowls. I mean, you could do a singing bowl meditation. That's one thing. Or you can just switch on the sound in your earphones or on your speakers. So you have the vision. Your vision is like in yoga. Yoga is about fixed positions. So your vision is fixed. Your hearing is fixed. You hear the pleasant, calming sound. You try to focus on the breathing. You breathe in, breathe out. Some people find it helpful to count breaths, but maybe just focus on the breathing. Then, it's like your body is stable. Your fingers are stable. It's helpful to maybe put the tongue at the top of your palate. Also fix it. Fix it up there. The eyes, keep them steady. Again, focused between 2 candles, and just breathe. And this is one of those emergency meditations that really, really helps me calm down. I don't want to go into this right now. This is slightly more advanced. You can also do breathing techniques, like breathing quickly, like these cycles of breathing, like prastrika, like exhaling through your nose and then taking a deep breath. But honestly, probably this deep breaths in and out. This works best. Visualization, going through your body. This is again also slightly more advanced, but also very helpful. Like imagine that you have maybe a piece of ice, or like a spotlight, like a small spotlight, and you just go and travel through your entire body. Try to touch like all the places, especially like focus on the fingers. Focus especially with your attention on the fingertips, on these places between the fingers, and just go along your body, and just try to pay attention to all of it. It's also tends to be very calming. One way to do this is in shavasana, so lying down. People who do yoga will understand that, but again, I'm trying to talk about too many things at the same time. Visualization. I really like to visualize kanji. One of the reasons I actually got my tattoos is because this helps maintain a certain kind of meditative mood. And I would visualize, for example, this character, which is actually one of the characters that has the connotation of nirvana. It means mu, or nothingness in Japanese. Well, I mean, of course, originally in Chinese, in Hanzi, right, in Chinese characters. Helpful. So visualize, imagine how you're drawing this kanji with, or Hanzi, with with a brush. Talking about too many things and maybe in a slightly haphazard fashion, but it's okay. It's okay. This is our first pass on meditation. I've been wanting to do something like this for a very, very, very long time. One of the things I could never get around to doing in the university. Let me, by way of kind of postscriptum, I hope that all of this was helpful to some extent. By way of postscriptum, say a couple things. So first of all, again, you can notice how it's like when I try to meditate, again, I have this calmness and serenity, and the thoughts just disappear. And I breathe in, breathe out. My speech becomes slower, and I become calmer. This is kind of the silent part of my experience. But then, it's kind of the silent part of my personality, the silent and the meditative part. And then there's the other part of my personality. This is this 10 years of teaching, where I have to talk, in this fashion. I talk quickly and I talk passionately. And I do feel that these two are two very different poles, and they pull me in different directions. Will I be able to strike a balance? I'm not sure. But then, again, don't want to go into this a lot right now, but I do just want to kind of make a note that, again, for me, meditation is associated with Buddhism or with yoga practice. And it's kind of interesting because the kind of yoga community I was a part of for many years was kind of non-denominational. We had Sikhs, we had Buddhists, we had a lot of Hindus, and we actually even had some Christians, some Muslims who also found place for meditation or for yoga in their daily practice. The Sufi traditions in Islam, for example, have a lot to say about kind of meditative states of mind. So you can do meditation as part of those traditions, but also kind of in philosophy. So I want to say that kind of even though my own understanding of meditation mostly comes from Buddhism, I want everybody to be aware that kind of meditation is about much more than just that, right? And then in the philosophical tradition, the classical philosophical tradition, I feel that's a problem with philosophy, and especially with academic philosophy. We talk too much. We focus on making presentations, on writing books and publishing articles, on giving exams or taking exams, right? But there's a space for practice. There's a space for practice, allowing philosophy to change your life, to change your attitude to yourself and to people around you, right? And I feel that this is very often, just by nature of the way kind of capitalist universities set up with grades and ratings and GPAs and CVs, right? Kind of, we have competition on who's kind of the most efficient in capitalist terms. We don't have competitions in terms of like, who's the best sleeper? Who has the calmest sleep? Who has most deep sleep at night, right? Or who has the lowest level of stress in society? We don't give medals for that. Kind of talk about social priorities. But what I'm trying to say is that when I read ancient philosophy, again, people like Epicurus or people like Socrates, or even people like Aristotle, or when I read ancient Daoist tradition or ancient Buddhist tradition, or when I read kind of contemporary philosophy, right? So critical philosophers such as Marx, such as Nietzsche, or more modern philosophers such as Freud, Lacan, Foucault, or Heidegger, I feel kind of that reading each and every one of those names, again, reading Foucault leads me to meditation. Foucault talks about how, in this society of discipline and observation, this surveiller et punir, right? You have this society of surveillance, gets under your skin. And meditation is one of those practices of self-defense. Again, Pierre Bourdieu talks about sociology as a martial art. Practice of self-defense, that meditation is practice of self-defense that helps you defend yourself against society. And Foucault actually wrote quite a lot about meditation. He tried Buddhist meditation, Zen meditation in Japan, but he didn't write a lot about that. He wrote much more about Stoic meditation, and that's also. I'm more of an Epicurean myself than Stoic, but I do have a lot of respect for Stoics as well, right? And likewise, when you talk about Lacan or Freud, I feel that kind of this psychoanalytic understanding of human consciousness as this complicated system, and there is no one singular soul, but in fact it's a complicated system of patterns, system of habits, system of kind of mental muscles, mental patterns of cognition, right? Meditation helps you see those patterns. So again, like Freud, I feel also leads you to meditate, ideally. I don't think Freud himself was much into meditation, but nobody's perfect, right? But I feel that careful reading of Freud or Lacan would lead you to meditate because it helps you understand where your mind is at and then also rewire your brain, right? And in this sense, again, for me, reading Freud and doing meditation goes hand in hand with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And sometimes people tell me, well, but isn't cognitive behavioral therapy and psychoanalysis opposite? And I don't think so. I think that ideally, well, again, like me, I, as a careful reader of Freud and Lacan, I find CBT one of the most conducive, one of the most, efficient, effective, congenial ways of engaging with one's own psyche. Incidentally, one of the goals of CBT is actually making you into your own therapist, teaching you to become, like, if the therapy is successful, you become to some extent your own therapist, right? And learning to notice the patterns, what goes on, and then trying to kind of reappraise them, and maybe change those patterns is a huge part of CBT. Anyway, I'm sure there's a million other things I wanted to say, but my mind begins to wander a little bit. So I think we're going to wrap this up here. Colleagues, thank you so much for your company. As always, feel free to stay in touch. Comments, questions on the YouTube channel. There's plenty of other videos, which I hope on all sorts of subjects, political philosophy, history of philosophy, consciousness, and quantum mechanics. Feel free to look around, or if you want to request a specific video, again, feel free to write to me. As always, once again, thank you so much for your company. I hope you have found the video helpful. And until next time, stay safe and take care. And let's do a bit of an outro meditation. Again, comfortable position. Deep breath. Enjoy the silence. Namaste.